Ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoy my video, please click the like button and share the video. It is the only way the YouTube algorithms really notices me. I will be very grateful to you. 5 creepy signs the dead are walking among us. You won't believe. 4. Scary story published by Scare Fiction. Chapter 1. The Ominous Arrival. Mark stood at the edge of the clearing, his eyes scanning the dense forest that surrounded the secluded cabin. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. This was supposed to be his fresh start, his escape from the chaos and turmoil of his past. But as he stepped forward into the wilderness, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The cabin stood before him, a weathered structure nestled among the towering trees. Its windows were dark and empty, like hollow eyes staring out into the forest. Mark felt a shiver run down his spine as he approached, the weight of his decision settling heavily on his shoulders. He had chosen this place for its isolation, for the promise of peace and solitude. But now, as he stood on the threshold of his new home, he couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of unease. As Mark stepped inside the cabin, he was greeted by the musty scent of old wood and dust. The interior was dimly lit, the sunlight filtering through the canopy of leaves above, casting dappled shadows across the floor. It was a small space, but it felt strangely comforting, like a cocoon shielding him from the outside world. Mark set down his bags and began to unpack, his movements slow and deliberate. Each item he removed from his suitcase carried with it a memory, a fragment of his past that he was trying desperately to leave behind. He had come here to escape, to find peace and redemption in the solitude of the forest. But as he unpacked his belongings, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. Outside, the forest whispered secrets to him, its ancient trees bending and swaying in the breeze. Mark listened intently, his senses on high alert as he strained to catch any hint of movement among the shadows. But there was nothing, only the sound of the wind rustling through the leaves and the distant call of a bird. As the sun began to set, Mark lit a fire in the hearth and settled down in front of it, the warmth of the flames chasing away the chill that had settled in his bones. But even as he stared into the dancing flames, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease that clung to him like a second skin. The hours passed slowly, the darkness outside pressing in on the cabin like a living thing. Mark tried to push aside his fears, to convince himself that he was safe within the confines of his new home. But as the night wore on, the feeling of being watched only grew stronger, until it felt as though 1,000 eyes were boring into him from the darkness beyond. Unable to bear the oppressive silence any longer, Mark rose from his seat and ventured outside into the night. The forest was alive with the sounds of the nocturnal creatures that called it home, their calls echoing through the darkness like ghostly whispers. Mark felt a chill run down his spine as he made his way through the trees, his senses on high alert for any sign of danger. And then he saw it, illuminated by the pale light of the moon, strange symbols carved into the bark of the trees surrounding the cabin. They were crude and primitive, yet there was something undeniably sinister about them, as though they carried with them the weight of centuries of darkness. Mark approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest as he traced the lines of the symbols with his fingers. They seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as though they were alive with some ancient power. And as he stood there in the darkness, surrounded by the silent sentinels of the forest, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Mark returned to the safety of his cabin, his mind racing with questions and fears. He had come here seeking solace and solitude, but now he couldn't help but wonder if he had made a terrible mistake. For lurking in the forest, something ancient and malevolent watched and waited, biding its time until the moment was right to strike. And as Mark settled down to sleep, he knew that his journey was only just beginning. Chapter 2: The Whispering Woods. Mark's footsteps echoed through the dense undergrowth as he ventured deeper into the forest, drawn by the whispered promises of secrets hidden within the shadows. The trees seemed to lean in closer, their twisted branches reaching out like skeletal fingers to ensnare him in their grasp. Yet, despite the growing unease that gnawed at the edges of his mind, Mark pressed on, determined to uncover the truth lurking within the whispering woods. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying foliage, and a sense of foreboding hung heavy in the air. Mark could swear he heard voices drifting through the trees, their words indistinct yet somehow familiar, like echoes from a forgotten dream. He quickened his pace, heart pounding in his chest as he sought the source of the haunting whispers. As he walked, Mark's senses seemed to sharpen, every rustle of the leaves and snap of a twig setting his nerves on edge. He cast furtive glances over his shoulder, half expecting to catch sight of some unseen watcher lurking in the shadows. But the forest remained eerily silent, save for the soft murmur of the wind through the branches. And then, just ahead, Mark saw it. A flicker of movement darting between the trees, a fleeting glimpse of something dark and insubstantial. He froze, his breath catching in his throat as he strained to catch another glimpse of the elusive figure. But it was gone, swallowed up by the darkness like a ghost in the night. Shaken, Mark pressed on, his footsteps quickening as he sought to put distance between himself and whatever lurked in the shadows. But no matter how fast he walked, the whispers followed him, their words twisting and warping like the branches overhead. He felt a cold sweat break out on his brow as he struggled to shake off the feeling of being watched. And then, just when he thought he couldn't take it anymore, Mark stumbled upon a clearing bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. It was a small, secluded spot, untouched by the encroaching darkness that seemed to suffocate the rest of the forest. Mark felt a surge of relief flood through him as he stepped into the clearing, the oppressive weight of the forest lifting from his shoulders. But his relief was short-lived, for as he looked around, he saw that he was not alone. Figures moved in the shadows at the edge of the clearing, their forms twisted and distorted like phantoms from another world. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he watched, paralyzed with fear as the figures drew closer, their movements silent and predatory. Desperate to escape, Mark turned and ran, his footsteps pounding against the forest floor as he fled deeper into the woods. But no matter how fast he ran, the shadowy figures pursued him, their whispers growing louder with each passing moment. He could feel their cold breath on the back of his neck, their twisted forms looming ever closer in the darkness. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Mark burst through the trees and stumbled into the clearing where his cabin stood. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath as he glanced frantically around him, half expecting to see the shadowy figures closing in for the kill. But the clearing was empty, save for the silent sentinel of the cabin looming before him. With trembling hands, Mark pulled himself to his feet and stumbled inside, his heart pounding in his chest as he slammed the door shut behind him. He collapsed onto the floor, his body racked with sobs as he struggled to make sense of what he had seen. But deep down, Hal knew that there was no rational explanation for the horrors that lurked within the whispering woods. And as he huddled in the darkness, alone and afraid, Mark realized that he was trapped in a nightmare from which there may be no escape. Chapter 3: Haunting Memories. Night after night, Mark's dreams were consumed by darkness. He would find himself wandering through the whispering woods, the shadows closing in around him like suffocating tendrils. And there, amidst the twisted branches and tangled undergrowth, he would see it, a spectral figure, its form shifting and twisting like smoke in the wind. The figure would beckon to him, its voice a soft whisper on the wind. Mark would try to flee, to escape the grasp of the haunting presence that pursued him relentlessly through the forest. But no matter how fast he ran, the figure was always there, just beyond his reach, its eyes burning with an otherworldly hunger. Each morning, Mark would wake drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest as he struggled to shake off the lingering terror of his nightmares. But even in the light of day, the memory of the spectral figure haunted him, its presence a constant reminder of the darkness that lurked just beyond the edge of his vision. Desperate for answers, Mark turned to the old journal entries he had discovered hidden within the cabin. The pages were yellowed with age, their ink faded and smeared with time. But as he read, a chill ran down his spine, for the words spoke of tragedy and loss, of a family torn apart by secrets too dark to name. The journal belonged to a man named Samuel, who had once lived in the cabin with his wife and children. His entries spoke of strange occurrences in the woods, of whispered voices and shadowy figures lurking in the darkness. But as Mark read on, he realized that there was more to the story than met the eye. Samuel's final entry spoke of a ritual performed in the depths of the forest, a desperate bid to appease the dark forces that haunted the woods. But something had gone horribly wrong, and in the end, Samuel and his family had paid the ultimate price for their folly. As Mark delved deeper into the journal, he felt a sense of unease settle over him. The words seemed to leap off the page, swirling around him like specters from another world. He could feel the darkness closing in, pressing down on him from all sides, threatening to swallow him whole. But despite the growing sense of dread that gnawed at the edges of his mind, Mark couldn't tear himself away from the journal. He was consumed by a desperate need to uncover the truth, to understand the forces that had driven Samuel and his family to their untimely demise. Days turned into weeks as Mark pored over the pages of the journal, his obsession with uncovering the cabin's dark history consuming him completely. He barely slept, his nights haunted by visions of the spectral figure that prowled the woods outside. And yet, despite the toll it took on his sanity, Mark couldn't bring himself to stop. For he knew that somewhere within the pages of Samuel's journal lay the key to unlocking the secrets of the whispering woods. And until he had uncovered the truth, he would never know peace. Chapter 4. Mark stood before the gnarled trees, his gaze fixed on the strange symbols carved into their bark. The symbols seemed to pulsate with an otherworldly energy, their meaning hidden behind layers of ancient mysticism. With trembling hands, Mark reached out to touch one of the symbols, feeling a jolt of electricity shoot up his arm as his fingers made contact with the rough bark. As he traced the lines of the symbol, Mark felt a chill run down his spine. There was something undeniably sinister about the symbols, something that spoke of a power far older and darker than anything he had ever encountered before. And as he studied them more closely, he began to see patterns emerge, connections that hinted at a deeper, more malevolent presence lurking in the shadows. It was then that Mark remembered the stories he had heard about the Whispering Woods, tales of an ancient cult that had once inhabited the forest, their rituals shrouded in secrecy and blood. The symbols carved into the trees were the same as those used by the cult, a chilling reminder of the dark forces that had once ruled these woods. With a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, Mark realized that he had stumbled into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The cult may have been long gone, but their malevolent influence still lingered in the woods, a spectral presence that watched and waited, biding its time until the moment was right to strike. Fear gnawed at the edges of Mark's mind as he realized the true nature of the danger he was facing. He knew he had to get out of the woods, to flee from this place before it was too late. But as he turned to leave, he felt a cold wind whip through the trees, blocking his path like an invisible barrier. Panic surged through Mark's veins as he realized that he was trapped, caught within the grasp of the forest's malevolent power. He tried to push through the barrier, to force his way out of the woods, but the unseen force held him fast, its grip unyielding. With no other options left, Mark turned and fled back to the cabin, his heart pounding in his chest as he raced through the trees. But even as he ran, he could feel the presence of the forest closing in around him, its dark tendrils reaching out to ensnare him in its grasp. As he burst through the door of the cabin, Mark slammed it shut behind him, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he leaned against the wood. He was trapped, alone and afraid, with no way out. And as the darkness of the Whispering Woods closed in around him, Mark knew that he was facing a danger far greater than he had ever imagined. Chapter 5: Confronting the Unseen. As Mark huddled in the dimly lit cabin, the air grew thick with tension. He could sense a presence looming just beyond the walls, a malevolent force that hungered for his soul. With each passing moment, the oppressive weight of the forest's darkness pressed down on him, suffocating him with its suffocating embrace. And then, without warning, the cabin was filled with a cold, ethereal light. Mark's breath caught in his throat as he watched in horror as ghostly apparitions materialized before him. They were the cult members, their faces twisted in agony, their eyes burning with a hunger that chilled him to the bone. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the danger he was in. He had stumbled into something far more sinister than he could have ever imagined, and now he was face to face with the spirits of those who had once served the darkness that lurked within the Whispering Woods. With a primal scream, Mark leaped to his feet, his fists clenched in determination. He would not go down without a fight, he vowed to himself. But as he charged at the ghostly figures, he quickly realized that he was outmatched. Their spectral forms passed through him like smoke. Desperate, Mark retreated into the shadows, his mind racing as he tried to come up with a plan. He knew that he couldn't defeat the spirits in a direct confrontation, not with their otherworldly powers. But he also knew that he couldn't stay trapped in the cabin forever, not with the darkness closing in around him. With a surge of adrenaline, Mark dashed towards the door, his heart pounding in his chest as he flung it open and raced outside. The forest was alive with the sound of whispers, the shadows shifting and writhing like living creatures. But Mark pushed aside his fear, his mind focused on one thing and one thing only: survival. As he ran, Mark could feel the spirits closing in behind him, their icy breath hot on his neck. But he refused to give up, refused to let them claim him as their own. With every ounce of strength he possessed, he pushed himself forward, his feet pounding against the forest floor, as he raced towards the safety of the clearing. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Mark burst into the clearing and collapsed to his knees, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The spirits hovered just beyond the edge of the clearing, their ghostly forms twisting and writhing in the darkness. But Mark refused to back down. With a defiant roar, he raised his fists to the sky and challenged the spirits to come at him. He would confront his deepest fears and darkest secrets head-on, he vowed. For in the heart of the whispering woods, where darkness reigned supreme, there was still a glimmer of light. And as Mark stood tall in the face of the encroaching darkness, he knew that he would never surrender to the sinister grasp of the forest. Chapter 6. The Veil Between Worlds. As Mark knelt in the clearing, catching his breath after his harrowing encounter with the spirits, a strange sensation washed over him. It was as though the very air around him hummed with an otherworldly energy, vibrating with power that he could not comprehend. And then, from the depths of the forest, emerged a figure cloaked in shadow. Mark's heart skipped a beat as he watched the figure approach, its movements fluid and graceful, like a wraith gliding through the darkness. He tensed, unsure of whether to flee or to stand his ground, but something about the figure's presence held him rooted to the spot. As the figure drew nearer, Mark could see that its features were obscured by the darkness, its form shifting and twisting like smoke in the wind. And yet, despite its eerie appearance, there was a sense of calm and reassurance emanating from it, as though it meant him no harm. "Who are you?" Mark asked, his voice trembling with fear and uncertainty. The figure paused, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as it regarded him. "I am but a messenger," it said, its voice a soft whisper on the wind. "A guide to those who seek to understand the mysteries of the forest." Mark's mind raced with questions, but before he could speak, the figure raised a hand, silencing him. "There is much you have yet to learn, young one," it said. "The forest is not just a place of darkness and despair. It is a gateway between worlds, a realm where the boundaries between the living and the dead are blurred." Mark's blood ran cold at the figure's words. He had sensed the presence of the spirits that haunted the woods, but he had never imagined that the forest itself could be a gateway to the realm of the dead. And yet, as he looked around him, he realized that the signs had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. "The spirits you encountered are but a glimpse of the power that dwells within these woods," the figure continued. "They are the remnants of an ancient cult that once worshipped the darkness that lurks within the forest. But their power is waning, their influence fading with each passing day." Mark listened intently, his mind racing with the implications of what the figure was saying. If the spirits were growing weaker, then perhaps there was a way for him to escape the forest's grasp after all. But he knew that he would need to act quickly if he hoped to harness the forest's power before it was too late. "The key to breaking free from the forest's grip lies within you," the figure said, its voice echoing in the stillness of the clearing. "You must confront your deepest fears and darkest secrets, for only then will you be able to harness the true power of the forest." With a sense of determination burning in his chest, Mark rose to his feet and faced the figure, his eyes ablaze with newfound resolve. He knew that the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but he also knew that he could not turn back now. For if he hoped to escape the sinister grasp of the forest, he would need to embrace the darkness within himself and emerge stronger on the other side. Chapter 7. Bargaining with the Beyond. Mark stood at the edge of the clearing, his heart pounding in his chest as he prepared to make his desperate bargain with the spirits of the forest. The figure that had emerged from the depths of the woods stood before him, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light as it awaited his decision. With a deep breath, Mark stepped forward, his voice trembling as he addressed the figure. "I will do whatever it takes to escape this forest," he said, his words echoing in the stillness of the clearing. "I offer you a piece of my soul in exchange for my freedom." The figure regarded him silently for a moment, its expression unreadable. And then, with a nod of its head, it spoke. "Very well," it said, its voice a soft whisper on the wind. "But know this, once the bargain is struck, there is no turning back. The path ahead will be fraught with peril, and you may find yourself tested in ways you never thought possible." Mark nodded, his resolve steeling as he prepared to face whatever trials lay ahead. "I understand," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that gnawed at the edges of his mind. "I am willing to pay whatever price is necessary to break free from this forest's grip." And with that, the bargain was struck. Mark felt a chill run down his spine as he felt a piece of his soul being torn away, leaving behind an emptiness that threatened to consume him. But he pushed aside the pain, focusing instead on the promise of freedom that lay ahead. But the spirits was not finished with him yet. As Mark turned to leave, a voice echoed in his mind, cold and menacing. "Not so fast, mortal," it said, its words dripping with malice. "There is one final task you must complete before your bargain is sealed." Mark's heart sank as he realized what the spirits were demanding. "A blood sacrifice," they said, to seal the deal and ensure his compliance. He knew that he had no choice but to comply, no matter how much it went against his every instinct. With a heavy heart, Mark retrieved a knife from his pack and made his way back into the forest. The air was thick with anticipation as he searched for a suitable offering, his mind racing with the implications of what he was about to do. And then, just ahead, he saw it, a deer, its eyes wide with fear as it watched him approach. With a sinking feeling in the pit of his stomach, Mark raised the knife and prepared to strike, knowing that there was no going back now. But as he looked into the deer's eyes, he saw something familiar reflected back at him. Fear, yes, but also a glimmer of hope. It was then that Mark realized that he couldn't go through with it, couldn't sacrifice another living being to satisfy the whims of the spirits. With a surge of determination, Mark dropped the knife and turned to leave, his heart pounding in his chest as he fled back to the clearing. He knew that he was defying the spirits' demands, risking their wrath in the process. But he also knew that he could not surrender to the darkness, could not sacrifice his humanity for the promise of freedom. And so, as he stood in the clearing, facing the spirits once more, Mark made his choice. He would fight for his soul, no matter the cost. And as the spirits closed in around him, their anger palpable in the air, Mark knew that the battle for his freedom was far from over. But he would face it head-on, with courage and determination, until the very end. Chapter 8. Descent into Madness. Forest whispered secrets to Mark, its ancient voice weaving through the tangled branches like a siren song. He could feel its dark tendrils wrapping around his mind, tightening their grip with each passing moment. Reality blurred at the edges, merging with nightmare as hallucinations danced before his eyes. Mark stumbled through the undergrowth, his footsteps erratic as he tried to make sense of the world around him. Shadows twisted and writhed in the corners of his vision, morphing into grotesque shapes that seemed to mock him with their malevolent laughter. He tried to shake them off, to push aside the creeping sense of dread that threatened to overwhelm him. But the forest's grip on his sanity was relentless, its influence seeping into every corner of his mind. As he pressed forward, Mark's thoughts grew disjointed and fragmented, like pieces of a puzzle scattered in the wind. He struggled to hold on to reality, to anchor himself in the chaos that surrounded him. But the harder he fought, the deeper he descended into madness, until he could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was merely a figment of his fevered imagination. Time lost all meaning as Mark wandered deeper into the heart of the forest, his mind consumed by delusions and paranoia. He saw faces in the trees, twisted and contorted with agony, their silent screams echoing through the darkness. He heard voices whispering his name, their words dripping with malice as they taunted him with visions of his own demise. But amidst the madness, a flicker of clarity remained. Deep within the recesses of his fractured mind, Mark knew that he had to unravel the secrets of the forest before it consumed him completely. He clung to this glimmer of hope, like a lifeline, pushing himself forward despite the overwhelming odds stacked against him. With each step, the forest seemed to grow darker, its shadows closing in around him like a suffocating blanket. But Mark refused to give up, his determination burning bright, even in the face of despair. He searched for clues, for anything that could help him make sense of the madness that threatened to swallow him whole. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Mark stumbled upon a clearing bathed in moonlight. In the center stood a gnarled tree, its branches reaching up towards the heavens like fingers grasping for salvation. And carved into the trunk were symbols, ancient and weathered with age, yet somehow familiar to Mark's eyes. With a sense of urgency burning in his chest, Mark approached the tree and traced the lines of the symbols with trembling fingers. And as he did, he felt a surge of energy coursing through him, as though the very essence of the forest itself was flowing through his veins. In that moment, everything became clear to Mark. He understood the true nature of the forest, of the darkness that lurked within its depths. And he knew that if he hoped to break free from its grasp, he would need to harness its power and use it to fight back against the madness that threatened to consume him. With newfound purpose, Mark set out to unravel the secrets of the forest, his mind focused and his spirit unbroken. He knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, but he also knew that he would never give up, no matter what horrors awaited him in the darkness. For he was Mark, and he would not let the forest claim him without a fight. Chapter 9. The Final Ritual. Mark's heart pounded in his chest as he followed the trail deeper into the heart of the forest, his footsteps echoing in the eerie silence that surrounded him. With each passing moment, the weight of the forest's darkness pressed down on him, threatening to crush him beneath its suffocating embrace. But he pushed forward, his resolve unyielding as he sought to uncover the truth that lay hidden within the depths of the woods. And then, just ahead, he saw it, a clearing bathed in an otherworldly light, the air thick with the scent of ancient magic. In the center stood a circle of stones, weathered and worn with age, their surfaces etched with symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. Mark knew that he had found the cult's final ritual site, the place where their darkest secrets were buried. With a sense of trepidation, Mark stepped into the circle, his heart pounding in his chest as he prepared to confront the spirits of the cult members once and for all. He could feel their presence all around him, their spectral forms swirling in the darkness like shadows cast by the flickering flames of a dying fire. As he stood in the center of the circle, Mark closed his eyes and focused his mind, reaching out to the ancient magic that pulsed through the stones beneath his feet. He whispered incantations, long forgotten by mortal men, calling upon powers beyond his comprehension in a desperate bid to break the hold that the spirits had over him. And then, with a flash of light and a crackle of energy, the spirits materialized before him, their forms twisted and distorted by centuries of torment. They hissed and snarled, their voices echoing in the darkness as they prepared to do battle with the intruder who dared to defy them. But Mark was not alone. With a surge of determination, he raised his hands and called forth the ancient magic that flowed through his veins, channeling it into a barrier of light that surrounded him like a protective shield. The spirits recoiled at the sight, their ethereal forms writhing in agony as they were repelled by the power of Mark's will. With each passing moment, the battle raged on, the air crackling with energy as Mark and the spirits clashed in a titanic struggle for supremacy. But despite their best efforts, the spirits could not break through Mark's defenses, their spectral forms dissipating like smoke in the wind as they were driven back by the sheer force of his will. And then, with a final burst of energy, Mark unleashed a wave of power that sent the spirits fleeing into the darkness, their cries of defeat echoing through the forest like a chorus of lost souls. He stood victorious, his chest heaving with exhaustion as he surveyed the clearing, knowing that he had triumphed over the forces of darkness that had sought to claim him. With a sense of relief flooding through him, Mark collapsed to his knees, the weight of his ordeal finally catching up to him. But amidst the exhaustion and the pain, there was also a sense of triumph, of victory over the darkness that had threatened to consume him. For he had faced the horrors of the forest head-on and emerged stronger on the other side. And as he looked up at the stars twinkling in the night sky above him, Mark knew that he was finally free from the sinister grasp of the whispering woods, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead with courage and determination. Chapter 10: The Price of Freedom. As Mark emerged from the clearing, his body battered and bruised, he knew that he had emerged victorious from the final confrontation with the forces of darkness that had sought to claim him. But victory had come at a great cost, a price that he would carry with him for the rest of his days. He had sacrificed a part of himself to the forest, offering up a piece of his soul in exchange for his freedom. And though he had emerged triumphant, he could feel the emptiness gnawing at the edges of his mind, a constant reminder of the darkness that still lurked within him. With each step he took, Mark could feel the weight of his ordeal pressing down on him, threatening to crush him beneath its suffocating embrace. The memories of his time in the forest haunted him like ghosts in the night, their whispers echoing in the recesses of his mind. He knew that he would never truly escape the haunting memories of his time in the forest, that they would follow him wherever he went, like shadows cast by the light of a dying fire. But he also knew that he could not let them consume him, could not let the darkness win. And so, with a heavy heart and a weary soul, Mark fled the woods, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the night. He knew that the road ahead would be long and treacherous, filled with challenges and obstacles that he could never have imagined. But he also knew that he would face them head-on with courage and determination until the very end. For he was Mark, and, though he may have been forever changed by his ordeal, he would never let the darkness of the forest claim him. He would carry the scars of his battle with him, always, a constant reminder of the price he had paid for his freedom. But he would also carry with him the knowledge that he had faced his deepest fears and darkest secrets and emerged stronger on the other side. And as he disappeared into the night, the whispering woods watched silently from the shadows, their ancient secrets buried deep within their tangled branches, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to stumble upon their dark and twisted paths. Chapter 11. Redemption and Regret. Mark returned to civilization with the weight of the forest still heavy on his shoulders, his mind haunted by the knowledge of what lay hidden within its depths. Everywhere he looked, he saw echoes of the whispering woods, the shadows of its twisted branches lurking in the corners of his vision. As he struggled to rebuild his life, Mark found himself tormented by guilt and regret for the choices he had made in the forest. He replayed the events of his ordeal over and over again in his mind, each memory more vivid and terrifying than the last. He wondered if he could have done things differently, if he could have avoided the darkness that had consumed him so completely. But no matter how hard he tried to push the memories away, they lingered like a stain on his soul, a constant reminder of the horrors he had faced. He tried to drown them out with distractions, throwing himself into his work and his relationships with a fervor bordering on desperation. But no matter how fast he ran, he could never escape the darkness that lurked within him. And so, as the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months, Mark found himself sinking deeper and deeper into despair. He felt like a prisoner in his own mind, trapped in a never-ending cycle of guilt and regret from which there seemed to be no escape. But amidst the darkness, there was also a glimmer of hope. For even as Mark struggled to come to terms with his past, he began to realize that redemption was possible, that he could find peace and forgiveness if he was willing to confront the demons that haunted him. And so, with a renewed sense of purpose, Mark set out to face his fears head-on, to confront the darkness that had consumed him and emerge stronger on the other side. He sought out therapy and support groups, reaching out to others who had faced similar struggles in the hope of finding solace in shared experiences. Slowly but surely, Mark began to rebuild his life, one small step at a time. He learned to forgive himself for the mistakes he had made, to accept that he was only human and that he was allowed to make mistakes. And as he did, he felt the weight of the forest's darkness begin to lift from his shoulders, replaced by a sense of peace and acceptance. But despite his best efforts to move on, Mark knew that the forest would always be a part of him, a reminder of the darkness that lurked within us all. And though he may never fully escape its haunting embrace, he also knew that he was not alone, that there were others who had faced the same demons and emerged stronger on the other side. And so, with a newfound sense of hope and determination, Mark set out to embrace the future, knowing that no matter what trials lay ahead, he would face them with courage and resilience, secure in the knowledge that he had overcome the darkest of shadows and emerged into the light once more. Chapter 12. Echoes of the Past. In the quiet moments of solitude, when the world grew still and the chaos of everyday life faded into the background, Mark heard the distant whispers of the forest calling to him. They were faint at first, mere echoes of the darkness that had once consumed him. But as he listened, they grew louder, more insistent, until they filled his mind with their haunting melody. He knew that the spirits of the cult members still lingered in the shadows, their malevolent presence lurking just beyond the edges of his consciousness. They were patient, biding their time until their next victim wandered into their domain, ready to ensnare them in their web of darkness and despair. But Mark refused to let them win. He had faced the horrors of the Whispering Woods and emerged stronger on the other side, and he vowed to never forget the lessons he had learned, the price he had paid for his freedom. He would not allow others to fall prey to the same darkness that had nearly consumed him. And so, with a sense of purpose burning bright in his chest, Mark set out to warn others of the dangers that lay hidden within the forest. He shared his story with anyone who would listen, recounting the horrors he had witnessed in the woods and urging them to stay away, to heed the warnings of those who had faced the darkness and lived to tell the tale. But despite his best efforts, Mark knew that there would always be those who would ignore his warnings, who would be drawn to the Whispering Woods by the promise of adventure or the thrill of the unknown. And so, he resolved to do everything in his power to protect them, to ensure that no one else would have to suffer the same fate that he had endured. He organized search parties and expeditions into the forest, working tirelessly to uncover its secrets and expose the darkness that lurked within. He collaborated with local authorities and experts in the field of paranormal investigation, pooling their resources and knowledge in a desperate bid to unravel the mysteries of the Whispering Woods. But try as they might, the darkness proved elusive, its secrets guarded jealously by the spirits that dwelled within. And though Mark knew that he may never fully vanquish the darkness that haunted the forest, he also knew that he would never stop fighting, never stop striving to protect others from the horrors that lay hidden within its depths. For he had faced the darkness head-on and emerged victorious, and he would not let the sacrifices he had made be in vain. He would carry the echoes of the past with him always, a constant reminder of the horrors he had witnessed and the price he had paid for his freedom. And as long as he drew breath, he would continue to fight, to stand as a beacon of light in the darkness, guiding others away from the Whispering Woods and towards a brighter future.